How I cut and layer my curly hair at home has changed quite a bit over the years. I used to do a wet curly cut, but now I've switched to a dry cut that's done on stretched hair. And this DIY haircut is for curlies who want long, subtle layers and wear a wide range of styles with their natural hair. Whether you wear it straight or curly, this haircut is suitable for any style. Let's go ahead and get into it. You're going to need some hair shears. Avoid using regular scissors as they can damage your hair. The hair ties are used for the laying portion, so do your best to use ones that won't pull or snag your hair. You'll need some clips to section your hair, a parting comb, and a detangling brush. The one I'm using is 2-in-1, and I primarily use the 𝐏𝐫𝐸 clip as an easier way to create a more precise, even layer for my overall length, but don't worry if you don't have it. I'll show you how to cut an even length without it. To add a bit more ease and to avoid having to re-wet my hair constantly, I prefer to do this on stretched hair. And for my ladies who are curious, this haircut can also be done on wet curls. Just keep a spray bottle handy so that you can re-wet it when it needs it. But cutting my curls in a stretched state allows me to get a more even cut that looks good whether it's curly or straight. And I've stretched my hair using a heatless stretching technique, which I already have a tutorial on, so the link will be in the card above or in the description box. I always start my haircut with a basic trim so that I have an even length to work with before I start cutting layers. Using my detangling brush that has a pointed tip for parting, I'm going to divide my hair straight down the middle. I want you guys to try and get as even apart as possible because precise parting affects how even the haircut comes out at the end. Next, detangle each side from ends to roots to clear your hair of any knots. To create an even length, I'll be using my 𝐏𝐫𝐸 clip, and after opening the clip, I'm leaning slightly forward to ensure my hair is hanging evenly on both sides before closing the clip. Then I place it as close as I can under my chin, and next, carefully slide the clip down until you reach the desired length you want to cut off. And if you're unsure, you could always start with 1/4 inch at a time and slowly work your way up to a shorter length. I want to cut about 1 inch off the overall length, so that is where I'll be leaving my clip. Once you've got the clip in the right spot, carefully cut your hair following the guide, and you may find that when you start cutting hair, it might be leaning to one side or the other. So to remedy this, I just run my fingers over the hair to help it stick up so that I can cut it off. It has teeth inside the clip to firmly hold the hair in place while cutting, but as you cut along the guide, make sure you're gripping the 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐸 clip tightly. This clip is a guide, so it makes it insanely easy to cut an even length from both sides at the same time, but you still want to take your time and grip it well as you're cutting. Once I take it off, it's pretty even, but I always find a few stragglers left behind. So to clean up the cut even more, I keep my head level and turn it to the side, using my pointer and middle finger to follow my brush down to the point I need to cut. Then once I get close to where I need to cut, I stop slightly above it, grip my hair, and begin cutting to form a solid line. And for those of you who don't have a 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐸 clip, this is what you could do to create an even length. Just keep track of how much you're cutting on each side to get it as even as possible. And to be honest, I cut a little too much on the side I just cut and made it slightly uneven, but I wanted to cut more anyway, so I went back in with my 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐸 clip for a second round, repeating the same exact steps. Leaning forward, clipping it on, sliding it to my desired length, squeezing the clip together as I cut my hair. I cut another solid inch off the ends and cleaned up the line of the cut by turning my head to the side and cutting off the extra hair. When I cut the excess hair, I'm using the shortest hair as my guide for the longer pieces. You want to make sure that you're holding your head as straight as possible as you're combing and gripping the hair, but once you've gripped the hair in the right spot, you could turn and move your head any way you need to see what you're cutting. As you're cutting, comb through and check how the length looks before cutting more. If you see hair sticking outside of the line, just follow through with the same process. What I like about this basic trim is that it gives round U-shaped layers, but we will be rounding out the cut even more with the next step. Sectioning the front portion of my hair, I'm gonna cut some face framing layers, and to figure out where you need to part your hair, place a comb on the flat of your head, and where it begins to curve away from the comb, this is where you'll want to begin your part. I'm making a C-shaped section starting from that point, extending out to about my temples on each side. Where the top of your head starts to curve forward, that is where your hair naturally wants to lay forward. After it's sectioned off, detangle your hair, and using my small 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐸 clip, I'm sliding it down to the point I want to cut, which is slightly more than 1 inch, and cutting along the guide. If you want to do it with a comb instead, just do the same way that I showed you before. Slide the comb through, follow through with your pointer and middle finger, hold it taut, and cut with what's outside of the line of your fingers. To create slightly shorter layers on the inside and longer ones on the outside, I'm twisting my hair once and then cutting about 1/4 of an inch off. I want mine to be on the longer side, so I'm cutting only a little bit, but once you're done, clip that section out of the way to move on to the next step. To create soft, rounded, U-shaped layers throughout the rest of your hair, split it back in half if you need to, detangle your hair once, and grab 2 hair ties to make 2 pigtails. Where you place the hair tie is going to dictate how dramatic the layering will be. It's also where your shortest layer will begin, so if your hair tie is low, it will create long, subtle layers. The higher you place your hair tie, the more round and short the layers will be. And to create even round layers, I'm placing mine a little behind my ear and closer to the crown of my head. The layers will still be long, but they'll have less of a subtle effect than low ponytails, and if you put your ponytails closer to the perimeter of your face, this will make them shorter towards the front and longer in the back. If you place your pigtails closer to the back of your head, the back layers will be shorter and the front layers longer. As you're placing the pigtails where you think you want them to be, keep all of that in mind because placement is everything. As you're putting the hair tie on, be careful that you aren't twisting the hair, just the hair tie, because twisting your hair can cause the layers to be choppy. After you're done making the pigtails, stop to double check that both sides are evenly placed before cutting it. Once they are, brush through your hair, place your pointer and middle finger behind the brush to hold onto the hair, and then go ahead and cut off the amount you want to and repeat it on the other side. And as you're pulling it to the side, try your best to keep your head level and straight. It was a bit challenging for me to keep my head straight and see exactly what I was doing because I was using a pretty small mirror. The last step I do for this DIY haircut is blending the layers, and doing this helps us avoid having large choppy gaps in between layers. Clip one side of your hair out of the way and part your hair into a vertical section. Brush the section out to the side with your fingers, following the brush, and cut any portions that are sticking out. You can also do this with the shorter curly clip, which is a lot easier in my opinion, but if your hair appears to have a jagged line when you pull it out, that is the sign that your layers need to be blended. This part is a bit hard for me to explain, but by the time you finish cutting it, you want your ends to form one solid line. And I parted my hair into 4 large sections to blend my layers, but you can do more to be as thorough as possible. And here's a close-up of what I'm talking about. So as I pull my hair to the side, I see a choppy line forming. So using the shorter hair as my guide, I'm cutting the longer pieces off to match the shorter pieces. In the front section, I'm doing the same exact thing. With this before and after, it's really clear to see. On the before, my ends are choppy, and after, it forms a solid line top to bottom. And one tip, if your hair looks even when it's big and poofed out, then it will most likely be even when it's curly. This is why I prefer to cut my hair stretched and blown out versus wet. I can see exactly what I'm cutting and how the shape will appear when it's curly. I style my curls in a wash and go so you could see that the shape is even and round. It makes my curls appear thicker than they actually are. If you need to, you can follow up with a dry curl cut to perfect it even more, but I chose to leave it as is. This haircut is pretty easy for me to do on a regular basis, and so far I've cut my hair about 3 times this year because for me, the more I cut my hair, the thicker it appears as it's growing out. I want you guys to give this haircut a try. Remember to start small and let me know how it turns out for you. Feel free to subscribe for more in-depth tutorials from me, and I'll see you in the next one. In this tutorial, I'll walk you through how I achieve an overnight blowout on my curly hair without heat. And while it can be worn on its own, I typically use this overnight blowout to serve as a base for heatless curls, silk presses, flexi rod sets, or just to get a break from my natural curls. This style can also be a great way to prep your hair before installing protective styles like Senegalese twist, locks, and even box braids. Once your gel is applied, comb through to clear your curls of any knots and then tie it into a low ponytail. To avoid it being too tight on the hair at the nape of your neck, tilt your head forward as you apply your hair tie. For the smoothest ponytail, first go through with a tangle teaser, then follow up with a smoothing brush. You'll want to get the top portion as smooth